Could a poor and unlettered girl really change the course of faith's history? In the bracing air of the French Pyrenees Mountains, in the unassuming village of Lourdes, the Virgin Mary chose the lowliest of her children to deliver a message that would resonate in the hearts of millions of believers until the end of time. What started as simple trips to gather firewood transformed into one of the most extraordinary events in the history of the Church, when heaven touched earth and a forgotten grotto became a source of countless blessings. Chapter 1. The Girl of the Grotto. In the winter of 1858, young Bernadette Soubirous lived in Lourdes with her family, in extreme poverty. The Soubirous family dwelled in an old, abandoned prison cell known as Le Cachot, where dampness and cold were constant companions. Bernadette, the eldest of 6 children, suffered from asthma since childhood, a condition that constantly weakened her and prevented her from doing heavy work. At 14 years old, she could not read or write, and her knowledge of the catechism was limited, although her heart held a simple and pure faith. On Thursday, February 11th, 1858, Bernadette went out with her sister, Toinette, and a friend to collect dry firewood near the Gave River. The family's need was urgent, and every branch they could find helped to heat the miserable room where they lived. While her companions crossed the small stream, Bernadette stayed behind, fearing that the cold water would worsen her asthma. In that moment of solitude, she heard a sound like a gust of wind, even though the trees remained still under the grey winter sky. Looking up at the grotto of Massabielle, a rocky hollow that the locals used as a shelter for pigs, Bernadette saw something she would never forget. In the upper recess of the grotto, surrounded by golden light, appeared a young woman of incomparable beauty, dressed in white with a sky-blue sash, barefoot, but with a golden rose on each foot. The apparition smiled at Bernadette with a sweetness that pierced her heart, and the girl, without fully understanding what was happening, fell to her knees and took out her rosary. The Heavenly Lady also held a rosary in her hands, and as Bernadette prayed, trembling with emotion, the luminous figure accompanied the prayers, sliding the beads of the rosary, but without moving her lips during the Hail Marys. Only when they reached the Glory Be did the vision reverently bow her head. When Bernadette finished her prayers, the apparition vanished, like light fading as a candle goes out, leaving the girl amazed and confused, unsure whether to speak of what had happened or to remain silent before such a great mystery. Upon returning home, Bernadette could not contain the secret and told her mother what had happened. The response was immediate, an absolute prohibition against returning to the grotto. Mrs. Soubirous feared that her daughter had been the victim of some illusion, or worse, of some deceit by the evil one. However, something in Bernadette's heart had changed forever. The smile of that lady, her gaze full of goodness, the peace she had experienced in her presence, all of that remained etched in her soul, like an indelible seal that no prohibition could erase. Chapter 2. The Heavenly Encounters. 3 days later, on Sunday, February 14th, Bernadette felt an irresistible inner impulse calling her back to the grotto. She begged her mother with such insistence that she finally obtained permission to return. Accompanied by other girls from the village, she brought holy water with her, advised by a neighbor who told her to sprinkle it on the apparition to see if it came from God or the devil. Upon arriving at Massabielle, the Heavenly Lady appeared again with the same sweetness, and Bernadette, following the instructions received, sprinkled the holy water while saying, "If you come from God, come closer. If not, go away." The response was an even more radiant smile that confirmed to the girl the divine origin of that presence. During the following weeks, the apparitions multiplied with a frequency that baffled everyone. The Virgin Mary visited Bernadette 18 times between February 11th and July 16th, 1858, establishing a silent dialogue that would transform not only the life of the seer, but the entire church. In the third apparition, on February 18th, the lady spoke for the first time. Asking Bernadette to come to the grotto for 15 consecutive days, she did not promise to make her happy in this world, but in the next, words that revealed the wisdom of heaven in the face of earthly ambitions. Visits to the grotto began to attract crowds. What initially were a few curious onlookers turned into hundreds and then thousands of people who came to witness Bernadette's ecstasy. The girl fell to her knees upon seeing the apparition, and her face was transfigured with a supernatural beauty that deeply impressed the witnesses. Some laughed mockingly, others wept with emotion, but no one remained indifferent to the spectacle of that humble shepherdess conversing with the invisible. The civil authorities viewed this phenomenon with concern, fearing public disorder or the birth of some dangerous superstition. The parish priest of Lourdes, Father Peramale, initially maintained an attitude of prudent skepticism when Bernadette came to him, conveying the lady's request that a chapel be built in that place. The priest demanded proof that the apparition say her name and that she make the wild rose bush that grew in the grotto bloom in the middle of winter. The heavenly response was not long in coming. Although not in the way the parish priest expected, the Virgin did not fulfill the miracle of the rosebush, but she would grant much more extraordinary signs that would manifest her presence in an unmistakable way. In those encounters, the Mother of God entrusted Bernadette with 3 secrets that the girl would never reveal to anyone, taking them with her to the grave. She also asked her to pray for sinners, to kiss the ground in penance for the conversion of souls, and to convey specific messages to the priests. Each apparition deepened the bond between heaven and earth, between the Heavenly Mother and her favored daughter, preparing the ground for the most astonishing revelations that were to come, and that would forever seal the supernatural character of those events. Chapter 3. The call to penance. The central message that the Virgin Mary conveyed in Lourdes was an urgent call to conversion and to penance. In an era when materialism began to spread across Europe and many were turning away from the faith of their parents, the Mother of God came to remind everyone of eternal truths the world seemed so eager to forget. Penance, 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 the Heavenly Lady repeated to Bernadette, accompanying these words with gestures that revealed the gravity of the moment that humanity was living through. It wasn't a message of terror, but of maternal love, warning her children of the danger they were in. During the 9th apparition, on February 24th, the Virgin asked Bernadette to kiss the ground for sinners. The girl obeyed immediately, prostrating herself on the damp earth of the grotto and kissing it repeatedly, while tears streamed down her cheeks. The onlookers were shocked at this scene of voluntary humility, not understanding the profound meaning of that act. Bernadette was offering a sacrifice of reparation for the offenses committed against God, uniting her small suffering to the infinite sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Penance, the Virgin taught, is not an arbitrary punishment, but a necessary remedy to heal the soul, a soul sick with sin. In that same apparition, the Heavenly Lady ordered Bernadette to drink and wash herself in the spring. The girl looked around in confusion, for there was no visible spring in that place. Following an inner prompting, she went to the back of the grotto and began to dig in the ground with her hands. At first, she only found mud, but she persisted in her task until water began to flow. She drank from that muddy liquid and washed her face, becoming covered in mud. Before the astonished and mocking gaze of many present, some thought the poor girl had lost her mind, but they would soon understand that this act of heroic obedience was part of a divine plan. The invitation to penance also included the praying of the Holy Rosary, a devotion that the Virgin Mary promoted by kissing the beads of her own rosary each time she appeared. The rosary, a crown of roses offered to the Queen of Heaven, thus became a powerful weapon against evil and a sure path to sanctification. Bernadette prayed fervently during the apparitions, and the Heavenly Lady accompanied her in silence, demonstrating that the contemplative prayer of the mysteries of Christ is the nourishment of the soul and the fortress of the spirit. Millions of pilgrims would learn this lesson and carry the rosary as an inseparable companion of their spiritual life. The call to penance was not just for Bernadette, but for all of humanity. The Virgin Mary, knowing the future sufferings that awaited the world, came as a foresightful mother to prepare her children for the trials to come. The conversion of the heart, the turning away from sin, constant prayer, and voluntary sacrifice were the remedies that heaven prescribed for a sick society. Lourdes thus transformed itself into a school of holiness, where each pilgrim would learn that the path to God necessarily passes through self-renunciation and through the loving acceptance of the daily cross that providence allows in each person's life. Chapter 4. I am the Immaculate Conception. Father Péramele, the pastor of Lourdes, had repeatedly insisted that the apparition reveal her identity. Bernadette conveyed this request to the Heavenly Lady on several occasions, but only received a silent smile in response, a smile that seemed to say the opportune moment hadn't yet arrived. The priest, a man of faith, but also of prudence, needed this confirmation before giving definitive credence to the extraordinary events that were shaking his parish. The wait lasted for weeks, increasing the anticipation of all those who followed the development of these prodigious events with rapt attention. On the morning of March 25, 1858, the solemnity of the Annunciation of the Lord, Bernadette went to the grotto before dawn, feeling in her heart that this day would be special. For the 16th time, the Heavenly Lady appeared, radiant with beauty, and the girl, following the instructions of the pastor, asked with humility and reverence, "Madam, would you be kind enough to tell me who you are?" She asked the same question 3 times, and 3 times the apparition responded, only with that smile that filled Bernadette's soul with ineffable peace. It seemed that the answer would be delayed again. But then something happened, something that would change the history of those apparitions forever. On the 4th time that Bernadette made her plea, the Heavenly Lady extended her hands towards the earth in a gesture of profound humility, then raised her eyes to heaven and pronounced in the local dialect the words that would resound for all eternity. Que soy era Immaculada Conception. I am the Immaculate Conception. Bernadette, who did not understand the meaning of those theological words, repeated them tirelessly, all the way to the parish house, fearing to forget even a syllable of that mysterious name. For her, who barely knew how to pray the Hail Mary, those terms were completely foreign to her everyday vocabulary. Upon arriving before Father Péramele, Bernadette repeated exactly what she had heard. I am the Immaculate Conception. The priest was deeply moved, for he immediately recognized the celestial confirmation that he had been waiting for. Just 4 years earlier, on December 8th, 1854, Pope Pius IX had solemnly proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of Mary, declaring as a truth of faith that the Mother of God had been preserved from original sin, from the first instant of her conception. A poor and unlettered girl from a town lost in the Pyrenees could never know this theological doctrine, much less invent such a precise phrase. The revelation of the divine name definitively sealed the authenticity of the apparitions. The Virgin Mary had not said, "I am the one who was conceived without sin," but "I am the Immaculate Conception," identifying her own essence. With this unique privilege, just as God revealed himself to Moses, saying, "I am who I am," Mary presented herself now with the title that best describes her singular holiness. Heaven confirmed the faith of the Church, and the Mother of God came to remind the world that she is the all-pure one, the full of grace, the Virgin without stain, who crushes the head of the serpent. Lourdes was thus linked forever to the mystery of the Immaculate Conception, inviting all the faithful to contemplate the immaculate beauty of she who is Mother of God and our Mother. Chapter 5. The Miracle of the Spring, the water that sprang forth for the first time. On February 25, 1858, when Bernadette obediently dug in the ground of the grotto, seemed initially insignificant. It was just a trickle of muddy water mixed with dirt, which many regarded with disdain and mockery. However, that small spring began to grow hour after hour, transforming into a constant flow that would soon reach a volume of over 100,000 liters a day. What the world considered ridiculous, God was transforming into an instrument of His wonders, following the divine pattern of choosing the humble and despised to confound the proud and wise according to the flesh. The first to dare drink from that water were simple people, moved by faith rather than reason. A stonemason named Louis Bourriette, who had lost sight in his right eye in an accident years ago, applied the water to his face after his daughter visited the grotto. To the amazement of everyone, he completely regained his vision. This marvel, which occurred a few days after the spring emerged, was the first in an innumerable series of healings that began to manifest. The news spread rapidly, and sick people from all over the region began flocking to Lourdes, seeking relief from their sufferings. Civil authorities, alarmed by the growing number of pilgrims and fearful of public disorder, decided to close the grotto and prohibit access to the spring. They put up barriers and stationed guards to prevent people from approaching. For several months, the Massabielle grotto remained closed, but this did not stop the faith of the people. Many came at night, evading surveillance, to take a little of that miraculous water to their homes. Others collected the water that flowed into the Gave River, believing it retained the same supernatural properties. The persecution only strengthened devotion and increased the number of conversions. Finally, on October 4th, 1858, Emperor Napoleon III ordered that the prohibition be lifted and that free access to the grotto be allowed again. The barriers were torn down amid cheers from the people, and the spring was once again available to all who came with faith. Since then, millions of people have drunk from its waters, bathed in the pools fed by the spring, and taken the blessed water of Lourdes with them to the ends of the earth. It is not a magical power contained in the water, but the faith that accompanies its use and the powerful intercession of the Mother of God, who responds to the trust of her children. The miracle of the spring continues to this day. Scientific studies have analyzed the composition of the water without finding any special chemical properties that explain the healings, thus confirming that these are supernatural interventions and not natural effects of the liquid. The spring flows constantly, never diminishing its flow, as a symbol of the inexhaustible graces that flow from the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Each drop of water is a reminder that God can use the simplest means to manifest His power, and that obedience to the requests of heaven, however incomprehensible they may seem, always leads to abundant blessings that exceed all human expectation. Chapter 6. The prodigious healings from the first days of the apparitions. Lourdes became the scene of extraordinary healings that defied all medical explanation. The testimonies multiplied: paralyzed people who walked again, blind people who regained their sight, terminally ill people who were completely healed. The Church, aware of the need to discern between authentic faith and fanaticism, established from the beginning a rigorous verification process. Each healing had to be examined by competent doctors, documented exhaustively, and subjected to scrutiny that ruled out any possibility of error, suggestion, or natural healing. Only those that passed this rigorous examination were officially recognized as miraculous. One of the most impressive healings occurred on March 1st, 1858, when Catherine Latapie, a woman who suffered paralysis in 2 fingers of her right hand due to a fall, submerged her hand in the water of the newly sprouted spring. She instantly recovered full movement of her fingers. This marvel happened just 4 days after the spring began to flow, demonstrating that God does not wait for men to build magnificent sanctuaries before granting his graces. Humility of heart and simple faith are the only conditions that heaven requires to pour out its blessings. Henri Bousquet, a 2-year-old boy who suffered from a terrible disease that had left him almost blind and with constant seizures, was taken by his mother to the grotto in April 1858. The woman bathed the boy in the ice-cold water of the spring, begging the Virgin Mary to have mercy on her son. Upon taking the child out of the water, the seizures had ceased completely, and the boy's eyes, previously veiled by the disease, shone with clarity. The doctors who had treated him were astonished to examine the boy days later, confirming that there was no natural explanation for such a sudden and complete recovery. Not all healings were physical. Many people came to Lourdes with diseases of the soul, more serious than any bodily ailment, and returned transformed internally. Hardened sinners who had abandoned the faith of their youth, upon witnessing the marvels of the grotto, or upon immersing themselves in the holy waters, felt their hearts of stone turn into hearts of flesh. Spiritual conversions, although less spectacular than physical healings, were considered by the Church to be the most valuable miracles, for they saved souls from eternal perdition. Lourdes thus revealed itself as a hospital of body and soul, where the Heavenly Mother exercised her ministry of integral healing. To this day, the Church has officially recognized 70 miraculous healings in Lourdes. Although the testimonies of people who claim to have received extraordinary graces number in the thousands, the recognition process is deliberately strict because the Church prefers to be prudent, rather than to give credence to false miracles that could discredit the faith. However, each officially recognized healing is an irrefutable testimony of the power of God and of the maternal intercession of Mary. The doctors of the Lourdes Medical Bureau continue to examine extraordinary cases, and every time they declare a healing as scientifically inexplicable, heaven proves once again that its love for humanity knows no limits or boundaries. Chapter 7. The Construction of the Sanctuary. During the apparitions, the Virgin Mary had clearly expressed her wish to Bernadette Soubirous, "Go and tell the priests to build a chapel here and to come in procession." This heavenly mandate was conveyed by the girl to Father Peyramal, who initially responded with a certain harshness, demanding proof before undertaking such a work. The parish priest was aware of the difficulties involved in building in that inhospitable place, and feared that everything could be the product of the imagination of a poor and sick girl. However, subsequent events, especially the revelation of the name Immaculate Conception, dispelled his doubts and ignited in his heart the desire to fulfill heaven's will. The first steps toward construction began years after the apparitions, when the Church, after rigorous investigations, officially recognized the authenticity of the events of Lourdes. Bishop Lawrence of Tarbes authorized public worship of Our Lady of Lourdes in 1862 and allowed the work to begin. The first stone of the chapel was blessed on October 14, 1862, beginning a transformation that would turn that forgotten corner of the Pyrenees into one of the most important pilgrimage centers of Christendom. Father Peyramal did not live to see the work completed, but he died certain that he had faithfully served the divine plan. Construction was no easy task. Complex engineering work had to be done to consolidate the rocky terrain and make the grotto accessible. The first structure was the crypt, consecrated in 1866, built directly over the grotto of the Apparitions. Later, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception was built in the neo-Gothic style, consecrated in 1876, which dominates the landscape with its slender spire pointing to the sky. This basilica stands exactly above the grotto, thus literally fulfilling the Virgin's desire that a chapel be built here, in the very place where she had appeared. Over the decades, and with the constant growth in the number of pilgrims, it became necessary to expand the sanctuary. In 1889, the Rosary Basilica was inaugurated with a larger capacity, located at the foot of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception, thus forming a harmonious architectural complex that can accommodate thousands of faithful simultaneously. The facades of the Rosary Basilica were decorated with mosaics representing the 15 mysteries of the Holy Rosary, turning the building into a stone book that visually teaches the devotion so dear to the Mother of God. Each architectural element was designed to elevate the spirit of the pilgrims toward heavenly realities. In the 20th century, the massive influx of pilgrims forced the construction of even larger spaces. The underground Basilica of St. Pius VI, inaugurated in 1958 to mark the centenary of the Apparitions, can accommodate up to 25,000 people inside. This immense underground construction, in the shape of an inverted ship, represents the militant church that pilgrimages in this world, sustained by prayer and the sacraments. Finally, in 1988, the Basilica of St. Pius X was consecrated on the surface, completing a complex of sanctuaries that annually welcomes millions of pilgrims from all continents. The small chapel requested by the Virgin had been transformed into a holy city, but the grotto remained intact, humble and simple, recalling that God is pleased with the small and that true greatness is in holiness, not in human constructions. Chapter 8. The Spread of Devotion. The fame of Lourdes spread with astonishing speed throughout France, and very soon throughout the entire world. News of the apparitions and miraculous healings traveled by word of mouth, from town to town, carried by pilgrims who returned, transformed from their visit to the grotto. The newspapers, although many were initially skeptical or openly hostile, could not ignore a phenomenon that mobilized so many people. Every article, favorable or unfavorable, paradoxically contributed to making Lourdes known, thus fulfilling, without knowing it, the providential design that the message of the Immaculate Conception would reach to the ends of the earth. The Church, following the official recognition of the apparitions in 1862, actively promoted devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes. The liturgical feast was established on February 11th, the anniversary of the first apparition, allowing millions of Catholics around the world to celebrate this event annually. Replicas of the grotto began to be built in innumerable parishes, convents, and religious houses, allowing those who could not travel to France to have a nearby place to venerate the Virgin of Lourdes. These grottos, however modest, became centers of prayer and devotion, where people came to ask for graces and renew their faith. Successive popes manifested their particular devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes. Leo X authorized the canonical coronation of the image of the Virgin in 1876 and established special indulgences for those who visited the sanctuary or prayed before an image of Our Lady of Lourdes. St. Pius X raised the feast to the rank of obligatory memorial in the universal calendar of the Church. Pius V, Pius V, St. John XXIII, St. Paul VI, St. John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis visited Lourdes or publicly expressed their veneration to the Immaculate Conception, venerated in that sanctuary. Each pontifical pronouncement strengthened devotion and confirmed the importance of Lourdes in the life of the universal Church. Religious congregations adopted Our Lady of Lourdes as a special patroness. The sick found in her a compassionate protector who knows human suffering. The missionaries carried her image and her message to distant lands, planting the seed of devotion in Africa, Asia, America, and Oceania. Wherever a grotto of Lourdes was erected, conversions, healings, and abundant graces sprang up. The Virgin Mary thus demonstrated that her motherhood knows no geographical or cultural boundaries, and that her intercession is available to all her children, without distinction of race, language, or nation. In our days, devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes remains alive and thriving. The water from the spring is distributed throughout the world, and new graces attributed to the intercession of the Immaculate Conception are reported every year. Pilgrimages have been facilitated by modern means of transport, but the spirit remains the same, to come as Bernadette, with humility and trust, to the feet of the Heavenly Mother. Lourdes has become a universal symbol of hope for the sick, of comfort for the afflicted, and of strength for all who struggle in the spiritual battles of life. The message of repentance, prayer, and trust in God resonates with the same urgency as it did in 1858, reminding each generation that heaven is close to those who seek it with a sincere heart. Chapter 9. The Spirit of Pilgrimage. To make a pilgrimage to Lourdes is not simply taking a tourist trip to a picturesque spot in the French Pyrenees. It's embarking on a path of inner conversion, following in the footsteps of millions of faithful believers who, since 1858, have flocked to the grotto of Massabielle, seeking God's grace through the intercession of His Blessed Mother. The true pilgrim arrives with a heart ready for an encounter with the sacred, aware of their sins and needs, but confident in divine mercy. Many begin the journey carrying heavy crosses, incurable illnesses, moral suffering, doubts of faith, but all carry with them the hope that the Virgin Mary will hear their prayers. The Lord's experience begins from the very first moment the pilgrim gazes upon the grotto. That rocky niche, humble and austere, contrasts dramatically with the magnificence of the basilicas surrounding it, a reminder that God chooses the simple to manifest His glory. To see the exact spot where the Immaculate Conception placed her immaculate feet produces a profound emotion that no description can adequately convey. Thousands of candles burn constantly before the grotto, each flame representing a prayer, an intention, a heart that rises toward heaven. The reverent silence that reigns in that sacred space, interrupted only by the murmur of prayers, speaks more eloquently than any sermon. The processions are one of the most emotional moments of the pilgrimage. Each evening, thousands of pilgrims carrying lit candles walk around the sanctuary esplanade, singing the Hail Mary in many languages. This Marian procession, known as the Torchlight Procession, transforms the night into a river of light, symbolizing the faith that illuminates the darkness of the world. The Eucharistic procession, celebrated on Sundays and major feast days, sees the Blessed Sacrament passing by, blessing the sick who wait on stretchers and wheelchairs. Many are healed, but all receive the most important grace, the real presence of Christ that strengthens their faith and gives them inner peace. The pools of Lourdes represent a moment of special intimacy with God. Immersing oneself in the icy waters requires an act of faith and humility, for one must strip oneself of everything and entrust oneself to the hands of the volunteers who assist in the bath. These waters have no special chemical properties, as scientific analyses confirm, but they are blessed by centuries of faith and prayer. Upon emerging from the water, many feel a deep spiritual renewal, as if they had left their sins, their fears, and their anxieties in those waters. Not everyone receives physical healing, but no one leaves the same as they entered. The true miracle of Lourdes is the transformation of hearts. The spirit of Lourdes is also characterized by fraternal charity. The sick and disabled occupy the place of honor in the sanctuary, cared for by thousands of volunteers who dedicate their time and energy to selfless service. The hospitaliers, members of various associations, accompany the sick pilgrims in all activities, recalling the words of Christ. "What you did for one of these, the least of my brothers and sisters, you did for me." This atmosphere of loving service transforms Lourdes into a foretaste of heaven, where there is no distinction between rich and poor, healthy and sick, but only brothers and sisters united in the love of Christ and under the maternal gaze of Mary. Whoever visits Lourdes does not return only with blessed water or souvenirs, but with a renewed heart and a commitment to live the gospel more fully in their daily life. Chapter 10. Saint Bernadette, Faithful Witness. After the last apparition on July 16, 1858, Bernadette's life changed radically, although not in the way many expected. Fame constantly pursued her. Curious people, devotees, and skeptics sought her out to question her about the visions. This constant attention was painful to her shy and humble nature. Bernadette never sought honors or recognition. On the contrary, she longed for a life hidden in Christ, far from the eyes of the world. Her only ambition was to faithfully fulfill God's will, just as the Virgin had taught her during those heavenly encounters that marked her existence forever. In 1866, at the age of 22, Bernadette entered the congregation of the Sisters of Charity of Nevers, adopting the religious name of Mary Bernard. Her departure from Lourdes was painful but necessary. She understood that she had to move away from the sanctuary so as not to become an object of undue veneration. In the convent of Nevers, where she would spend the last 13 years of her life, Bernadette experienced the cross in many ways. Her health, always fragile since childhood, deteriorated progressively. Asthma, bone tuberculosis, and other ailments tormented her constantly, turning each day into a calvary of physical suffering that she offered for the conversion of sinners. But physical suffering was not her only cross. Bernadette also faced spiritual trials that purified her soul like gold in the crucible. Some of her fellow religious sisters, jealous or skeptical, treated her harshly, constantly reminding her that she was good for nothing and that the community had accepted her only out of charity. The superior, a virtuous woman but of a severe character, subjected Bernadette to public humiliations to preserve her from pride. These trials, although painful, strengthened the humility of the young religious sister and conformed her more and more to Christ crucified. Bernadette never complained or demanded special treatment for having been the visionary of Lourdes. On the contrary, she wished to be the last of all. During her years in the convent, Bernadette rarely spoke of the apparitions. When asked about those events that had moved the world, she answered with simplicity and precision, but without allowing nostalgia or pride to touch her heart. The grotto of Massabielle remained etched in her memory as the place of her greatest earthly joy. But she knew that her vocation was not to live on memories, but to walk forward in faith. She faithfully carried out her modest duties in the convent infirmary, caring for the sick sisters with maternal tenderness, until her own illness confined her to bed permanently. On April 16th, 1879, at the age of 35, Bernadette breathed her last sigh, pronouncing the words, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for me, a poor sinner." Her death was peaceful, as befits one who has lived in grace and dies in the peace of Christ. The Church beatified her in 1925 and canonized her on December 8, 1933, precisely on the feast of the Immaculate Conception, forever linking the humble visionary with the mystery that the Virgin Mary had come to confirm in Lourdes, the body of Saint Bernadette Soubirous, discovered incorrupt in 1909 during the beatification process, now rests in a glass urn in the chapel of the convent of Nevers, a silent but eloquent testimony to the holiness of the one chosen by heaven to be the messenger of the Immaculate. Her life teaches that true greatness does not consist in seeing heavenly visions, but in faithfully living the gospel in the ordinary circumstances of each day, transforming suffering into an offering of love. Chapter 11. The Spiritual Legacy of Lourdes. The message of Lourdes transcends time and the particular circumstances of the 19th century to become a perennial teaching for all generations. The first lesson that the Immaculate Conception taught in the grotto of Massabielle is the centrality of prayer in the Christian life. The Holy Rosary, which the Virgin carried in her hands and prayed along with Bernadette, is revealed as a powerful spiritual weapon against the forces of evil and as a sure path to sanctification. To meditate on the mysteries of Christ's life through the eyes of Mary is to enter into the very heart of the gospel, contemplating the truths of faith that transform human existence. The call to repentance resonates with prophetic urgency in our time, perhaps more than ever before. We live in an age that seeks immediate pleasure, that flees from sacrifice, and that ridicules mortification. Lourdes proclaims the uncomfortable but liberating truth that without self-denial, there is no authentic following of Christ, and without the cross, there is no resurrection. Repentance is not masochism, nor a morbid pursuit of suffering, but necessary medicine for the soul wounded by sin, fasting, watching, mastering disordered passions, accepting daily setbacks with patience. These are the acts of penance that heaven asks, not impossible heroic feats, but constant faithfulness in the small things. Lourdes also teaches the importance of the sacraments, especially confession and the Eucharist. The Virgin Mary did not come to reveal new doctrines, nor to inaugurate unprecedented paths of salvation, but to recall the ordinary means that Christ instituted to sanctify his children. Thousands of pilgrims who arrive at Lourdes, far from God, rediscover the grace of the sacrament of reconciliation, experiencing the peace and joy of divine forgiveness. The Eucharistic procession, the culminating moment of the day at the sanctuary, proclaims the absolute primacy of Christ in the life of the Church. Without the Eucharist, without adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, all Marian devotion would be vain and sterile. The legacy of Lourdes includes a powerful call to filial trust in Mary Immaculate. The Mother of God appeared, not to instill fear, but to awaken hope. Her maternal smile, which captivated Bernadette's heart, continues to illuminate those who come to her with the simplicity of children. Mary does not promise to eliminate all the difficulties of earthly life, but assures that whoever trusts in her will not be disappointed. The countless graces granted in Lourdes testify that the intercession of the Virgin is powerful before God, and that she listens with predilection to the supplications of the humble and afflicted. Finally, Lourdes reminds us of the dignity of Christian suffering. When it is united to the sacrifice of Christ, the sick who make pilgrimages to the grotto are not objects of pity, but teachers of faith, who teach the world how to transform pain into a redemptive offering. Many return without having obtained the physical healing they sought, but enriched with a greater grace, the understanding of the salvific value of suffering embraced with love. The cross is not an absurdity, nor an arbitrary punishment, but the path that Christ traced, and that leads to the glory of the resurrection. Lourdes is a school where one learns this wisdom, that the world considers foolishness, but which for believers is the power of God. The spiritual legacy of the apparitions will remain as long as there are hearts thirsting for truth, peace, and holiness, because the message of the Immaculate Conception does not age nor lose its validity. It is the gospel itself, presented with the maternal sweetness of the one who loves us with eternal love. Chapter 12. Prayer to Our Lady of Lourdes, O Immaculate Virgin Mary, who in the blessed grotto of Massabielle deigned to appear 18 times to the humble Bernadette, showing the world the beauty of your spotless purity and the infinite love of your maternal heart. Prostrate before your blessed presence, I come to you with the confidence of a needy child. You who revealed your glorious name, I am the Immaculate Conception, reminding the Church and the world that from the first instant of your existence you were preserved from all stain of sin. Obtain for me the grace to flee from evil and to live in holiness all the days of my life. Beloved Mother of Lourdes, who asked for prayer and penance for the conversion of sinners, grant me a heart truly repentant of my faults and willing to repair the offenses committed against your divine Son. Help me to embrace with love the daily crosses, to kiss the earth of my humiliations as Bernadette kissed the ground of the grotto, and to offer my small sacrifices for the salvation of souls who walk far from God. May the Holy Rosary be my faithful companion on the path of life, and may, meditating on the mysteries of Christ, I may know Him, love Him, and follow Him with total generosity. Immaculate Virgin of Lourdes, fountain of living water that springs forth to quench the thirst of your pilgrim children, wash my soul of all its impurities in the waters of divine grace. If my body suffers illness, grant me the strength to endure the suffering with Christian patience, and if it is your will, obtain for me the health I need to fulfill the duties of my state. But above all, my mother, heal the wounds of my spirit. Heal my heart of its disordered affections. Free me from the bonds of sin and lead me along the sure path that leads to heaven. Our Lady of Lourdes, who has poured out so many graces upon those who come to your sanctuary with sincere faith, do not allow me to depart from you without having experienced the tenderness of your maternal gaze. Present my supplications before the throne of your Son Jesus. Intercede for me and for all those I entrust to your protection. May none of us be lost eternally, but may we all attain the happiness of heaven, where we will contemplate you in the glory of your Immaculate Conception, forever and ever. Amen. O Immaculate Mary, Mother of God, and our Mother, Blessed Virgin of Lourdes, morning star that dispels the darkness of sin, comfort of the afflicted, health of the sick, and refuge of sinners, bless your Church, strengthen our priests, sanctify families, protect the young, accompany the elderly and those who are dying. May your name be glorified throughout the earth, and may your message of penance, prayer, and trust in divine mercy be embraced by all people of goodwill. Amen.